We now welcome former supervisor and now retired Judge Quentin Kopp, who was recently appointed chairman of the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Welcome.
Thank you.
You've been on this or these programs before.
I have been, but not in at least 8 years.
Well, you know, it's funny. We had P.J. Corkery on, and you know what a great character he is. And he was talking about the board, and he said, you know, what we need now is we need someone like Quentin Kopp. He's going to ask, how much does it cost? You know, and I mean, you know, the thing is that so many of our viewers and so many of the residents in San Francisco are young and don't remember you, don't remember my last program. And certainly don't remember Sue Bierman. I thought we'd just tap on that. When I was in high school, I wrote an essay about her demonstration down the Panhandle, because it was the first time, wasn't it, that urban environmentalism was born?
Yeah, 1964. Dealing with the so-called Panhandle Freeway, a plan to build a freeway through the Panhandle and then to connect with the Golden Gate Bridge.
In those days, the California Transportation Authority was God. If they wanted to come down your street and take your house, they're going to do that. No one had ever stood up to that authority.
Not in the way and to the extent that occurred with respect to San Francisco opposition to the Panhandle Freeway, and it was truly grassroots, and it was directed at a very large project. There may have been sporadic, smaller project opposition incidents, but not on that level. So,
for our younger viewers, who was Sue Bierman, and when you worked?
When I met her, well, I met Sue in 1958. I was a member of the Democratic League, 21st Assembly District Democratic League. She was active, and there were fights over control of the Democratic County Central Committee.
As there always
and
is.
I was allied with forces which include now forgotten people like Bill Malone, who during the 40s and 50s was the so-called Democratic boss, and Jack Ertola, retired Superior Court judge now, a former supervisor. On the other side were the Burtons, led by A. Philip Burton, and Sue was one of his acolytes.
Oh, she was not part of the rebel, she was part of the establishment.
No.
Well, they were the rebels then.
They were the rebels trying to obtain control of the Democratic County Central Committee. And I think they eventually did in the late 1960s, early 1970s.
They became the establishment.
Yeah, there was a momentous race for county committee chairman between George Moscone and Don King, who was then a lawyer, later a Superior Court and Court of Appeal justice, now retired. Don King was our candidate. He prevailed over George Moscone. But Sue was always active, and of course in 1964 she was one of the leaders in the stopping of the freeway through the Panhandle.
And some say that was the birth of urban environmentalism. Previous to that, environmentalism was always associated with the mountains and the lakes and you know, the wilderness, but that was the first time that I understand that had ever occurred in that way, and that led to spur-type groups that were watching transportation and watching housing impact and all these other impacts.
Yeah, it was an auspicious event, no question about it.
You know, I know you are a diplomat and do not talk about San Francisco politics, and I don't want to talk about politics per se, but the culture of the board now, I mean, it's obviously youth-oriented, it's more green, it would make Sue Bierman very happy, but the fiscal integrity that you brought, and you were the conscience of the board. Is there anyone out there that took up your legacy? Do you see anyone out there?
I don't think so. It was indeed a different culture. Most of the 11 members, after I was elected in 1971, were Democrats. In fact, all but 2 were Democrats. The only 2 Republicans were John Barbagelata and John Molinari, who was elected the same year I was in November 1971, and then John Molinari later changed his registration, became a Democrat. But nevertheless, there was a custom and practice that whenever our meetings went beyond dinner time, 5:36, we all went to dinner together at a given restaurant. Usually it was Bardelli's on O'Farrell Street. Sometimes it was Alfred's up near the Broadway tunnel.
Good choice there.
Yeah. And we had dinner for an hour and a half or 2 hours it might be, and then we went back. We had our disagreements. We had our 6-5 votes. We had our 8-3 votes. We had a fight over the property tax. This was before Proposition 13, the property tax rate in 1973 when Joe Aliotta was mayor. And there were 5 of us who wanted to reduce the property tax. 6 did not. And they dubbed themselves the Responsible 6.
I see.
We were with Joe Aliotta in reducing the tax. We were unsuccessful because he could veto the tax ordinance, property tax ordinance, but we couldn't override the veto because we didn't have 8 votes to do that.
Civility, even in Sacramento or Washington, has changed too. That kind of comradeship you were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just San Francisco that seems to be somewhat more polarized and less friendly at City Hall. But isn't it true also in Sacramento and in Washington that it's become much more of a contact sport and there's less of that buddy attitude after hours and negotiating and compromising and finding common ground? It seems to be ideology oriented more.
I was elected to the Senate in 1986. I re-registered as an independent beginning in 1985 for reasons entirely apart from that. When I came to the state Senate, it was common, for example, Barry Keene from Elk in Humboldt County, actually Mendocino County, was a Democratic majority leader. And so he had a big plush office. And he would invite 4 or 5 state senators to the office, 5:30, to have a cocktail. And there'd be a couple of Republicans, a couple of Democrats. If I were there, I was the only independent in the legislature. We'd have spaghetti dinners at somebody's house or apartment, as the case may be. There were dinners at Frank Fatt's, particularly, 4, 5, 6 members of the legislature, both D's and R's. I don't know if that's still the case, either in the Senate or in the Assembly, and I don't know if it's the case in Washington. But it was not a bad era in the years I was in the Senate, which were 12, 86 to 98.
Let's flash forward now. On this recent appointment, it was almost, I think it was last week, you were named chairman of the California...
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The
I was actually appointed by the State Senate Rules Committee, which acts for the whole State Senate, in the middle of June. And the first meeting after my appointment was August 9th, and I wound up as chairman.
Of the
California High-Speed Rail
Now people have heard about it. And anyone who knows Quentin Kopp knows that whenever anyone heard about BART to the airport, it seemed like a pipe dream. Well, there is BART to the airport. Many people abandoned the thought of BART to the airport, but you stayed with it. Now here's high-speed rail.
Yeah.
Is it going to really happen?
I think it will, and I'd estimate it'll take about 10 years for the line. The first segment is Los Angeles Union Station to San Francisco, Transbay Terminal. Whether it's at 4th and Townsend or whether it's moved down to, 1st and Mission, whatever it is. And that's, about 450 miles. The eventual system will be all the way from San Diego to Sacramento, about 700 miles. But that first segment has an estimated cost of about $20 billion. In this year's State Budget Act, for the first time, there's $14,300,000 for preliminary engineering and right-of-way acquisitions. Next year, we'll ask for an appropriation of $100 million to finish the engineering, and to get started on actually acquiring right-of-way. And then in 2008, voters will have a chance to approve a $9,950,000,000 bond issue, which then will enable us to begin the building of the Los Angeles-San Francisco segment. 2.5-hour train ride at speeds of about 180 to 220 miles per hour.
2.5 hours from
Union
Angeles
Station to Transbay Terminal, and I defy anyone to beat that time taking an airplane.
Yeah, in terms
much
of
less driving your automobile.
Yeah.
When
Wow.
you get through with the parking, or if you're taking public transit to and from the airport, you're over 2.5 hours, San Francisco to LA.
And we are seeing trains at 225 miles an hour. I think Hong Kong, the airport to downtown Hong Kong, or maybe it's also.
Here's where it is. It's in France, which actually chronologically I ought to start in Japan. 40 years it's been operating in Japan. As a matter of fact, in November, the authority and members of the legislature are going to be on a fact-finding mission invited by the Japanese government to inspect it, because they want to bid on operating our system once it's built. Our system will be built by taxpayers, but then operated privately by a concession winner who pays us back an estimated $300 million a year and more. It'll operate at a profit. But anyway, it started in Japan. And then 25 years ago, France commenced operation. That's called the TGV system. I've been on it about 5 times. That holds the record. That train has done over 300 miles per hour. It runs regularly at 200 miles per hour. And then came Germany, the ICE. Then came Spain. Hong Kong has it.
Yes.
The Chinese just built a different type of high-speed system, maglev, which I can talk about if we have time, from the airport at Shanghai into Shanghai itself.
Yeah, that's the one I saw recently on the Discovery Channel. It was remarkable, just remarkable.
That's magnetic levitation, hence the nickname maglev. We have discarded it. We won't use it. We'll use steel on steel. The reason we won't use it is because it has never been operated commercially by the manufacturer. The manufacturer is a German company consortium. I've been on it. They have a test track in Bremen, about 4 miles, but they've never operated it commercially themselves. So we're a little skeptical.
I can tell by the look in your eyes this is going to happen, and we thank you for coming back. I know you can come back and report to us on it.
I hope you'll have me back.
Thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. For program schedules, post-production notes, and free streaming video of select interviews, visit our website at www.sfunscripted.com.